And so over the last couple weeks, we've looked at some different things. We talked about in week 1 of this series, we talked about the idea that Christ desires to be first in our lives. That if we are truly going to live a life where we are second and Christ is first, then we have to know and to understand that Christ desires to be first in our life. Second week, we looked at this idea of selfishness does not equal servanthood. That when we told the story that I shared with you that day from Scripture, we talked about how Jesus said that I came to serve, not to be served. And that so often when we get focused on ourselves and we get caught up in our own world, then we become selfish and we begin to look at things through a me lens, and we see things through our own lens and don't see the people that are around us. And so we talked about the idea that selfishness does not equal servanthood, and that God called us to love and to serve people. And then last week we talked about this idea of living this fearless life, that when we are second and Christ is first in our lives, that we can live this life that is fearlessly. And I told you that once you become fearless, life becomes limitless. That if we live our lives second and Christ first, then we can live this life fearlessly. What is it that you want to do? What is a dream that you have? What is it that God may be calling you to? Whatever it may be, that we can live our life without fear when He's first in our lives. And so today I want to talk to you. I want to look at the power of prayer. And what does prayer look like? And here's the idea that if we're going to be second and Christ is going to be first in our lives, then we've got to have a life of prayer. That prayer can't just be something that we do when we think about it. It just can't be something that's just something that we do first thing in the morning. Like, it's got to become, all of that is good, but it's got to become a product of who we are. It's got to be, like Josh Turner said in the video, a continuous conversation that you're having with God all day, every day, about everything. Think about that. I mean, we're all busy. We all got a lot of things going on. Some of us have kids. Some of us don't. We're just crazy. We're running. We got school. We got work. We got family. We got all these things. And so often we're so caught up in everything that's going on around us that prayer is just an afterthought. Or it's something that we check off on our list. And so this past week, I had the opportunity for Monday through Wednesday, I had the opportunity to go to this conference, this pastor's conference that was down in Fort Myers. I'm part of this pastor coaching network called Brotherhood. It's amazing. It's been life-changing for me, life-changing for Kim and I. I believe it's going to be life-changing for our church. And so I got this opportunity to go to this conference, and I'm there. And isn't it interesting? Like, if you've ever been in a position in your life with Christ, like if you grew up with church, if you grew up in church and you got the chance to go to summer camp or to youth camp as a student, or you had the chance to go to an opportunity where you're just in the presence of God for multiple days at a time. And if you will open up your heart, what God will do, right? You leave these places, like our students leave camp, they're fired up, they're pumped up. We call it a camp high. They're just like, woo, Jesus is amazing. I can't wait to get back. And it lasts for a couple weeks, and then it just kind of fades away. I go to this conference, I come back, like, it was amazing, it was great. God spoke some things into my heart that I needed to hear personally. It was great. You're on high, you come back, and then a couple weeks life happens, and it just kind of starts to fade away. I want us to avoid that. I want us to be as excited on Sunday mornings for worship as we would be if we were at camp or if we were at Next Level Church Conference or wherever we would be, that when we walk in this place on Sunday, we're excited about what God has done that week and what God's going to do the following week. And I believe if we lived our lives in a constant sense of prayer and a constant of prayer, that we were constantly praying, we were constantly reaching out to Him, we tried to stay in the presence of God as much as we could, I believe that our lives would look different. How many of you guys ever as a kid ever played this game, or maybe even as an adult, because Kim and I did it the other day with Katie and Michaela, have ever played this game called hide and seek, right? Everybody at some point has played hide and seek. And the idea is that you either, like we just moved a couple weeks ago, and the house that we got is much bigger than the house that we had, and the kids wanted to turn all the lights out in the house and play hide and seek in the dark the other night. And Kim and I were like, you know what, let's just do it, right? So we turned out all the lights, and it was Kim and Michaela, who is my 13 and my 9-year-old, against Kim and I, right? And so we're there, and they're going together, or Katie and Michaela, right? My 13 and my 9-year-old. Kim is my wife. And so, I talk too fast sometimes. And so we decide that we're going to play hide and go seek in the dark. And so Katie and Michaela against Kim and I, they turn out the lights. You know the idea, right? You've got a seeker and you've got a hider, right? And so we played teams and it was good. So we count to 50 in our house. And so we count to 50 and the kids scatter wherever, all over the house, and they're wherever. And all of a sudden we're playing in the dark. So we got a flashlight. And if I hit you with the flashlight, we find you, that kind of thing, right? And so you've got hiders and you've got seekers, and even as kids, wherever you may be, in a building, in a house, outside, the whole premise of it is that the seekers are looking to try to find those people that are hiding. And if you find a really good spot, you don't ever tell anybody about it because you just keep going back to it every single time because no one has found you yet, and you're just kind of hiding there, hoping that no one's going to find you. And finally, maybe whoever the seeker is, or the seekers, in our case the other night, like they get frustrated and they can't find you. And so they want to give up, right? And they're like, I give up, I can't find you. Where are you at? And then you're like, go downstairs because you can't find my hiding spot, right? But the whole idea between hide and seek is this idea that we hide and someone seeks us. But how often in our relationship with God do we play hide and seek? Like we get into a position, or we find ourselves in a state of mind, or our heart is a certain condition where we just hide. And I don't believe that necessarily I believe that God is always seeking us, but I believe that God is always there for us. Like He's never gone anywhere. Like I heard somebody say one time, like we're running so much away from God that if we would just stop and turn around, He would be right there. We play this game of hide and seek because of the condition of our heart or the condition of our mind that we run and hide. We talk about it a lot here at CityPlace in the idea of isolation, that we isolate ourselves, that we pull ourselves away from people, and isolation is such a bad place to be. The evil one can do so many things in your mind when you are isolated, when you are hiding, when you pull away. He can do so many things, just speak so many lies over you and into you. Nobody loves you. Nobody cares for you. Nobody wants to talk to you. Nobody wants anything to do with you. Just stay hidden. Don't reach out. Just stay where you are. Whatever it may be. You're not loved. You're only loved because of what you do for people. You're only loved because of this. You're only loved because of that. You're only loved because you planted a church, not because you're a child of God. Like they just breathe all these lies into you when you begin to pull away and isolate ourselves. And the entire time, God is there waiting on us if we would just turn around and begin, I believe, to pray. And we see often in the Scriptures, if we are to pattern our lives after Jesus, right? I mean, if we got to be like anybody, let's be like Jesus. That so often He understood that He needed to withdraw. It didn't matter if He felt empty or He had given a lot of Himself, He withdrew and He went and prayed. And so today, only kind of as a reference, it's not the main text for today, but only as a reference, I want you to turn to the book of Mark and chapter 6 really quickly. In Mark chapter 6 and verse 45 and 46, I'll get there in just a moment. It may be a story that some of you are familiar with. Some of you may have never heard it before. And if you haven't, it goes something like this. Jesus and His disciples are there. Jesus says, hey, listen, they just come back from this journey. They come back basically from almost kind of like an evangelism mission trip where the disciples are out in pairs and they're gone and they're out and about and they're sharing Christ and they're doing all these things. And they come back and they begin to give Jesus this report of everything that they've done, the lives that they've changed, the miracles that have happened, all that's gone right in this time that they were there. And Jesus says, hey, you need some rest. Let's get in the boat and let's go to the other side over here and let's just get some rest because you've given everything that you have. Let's just go get some rest. And they get in the boat and they head over to the other side, but people see them going to the other side, and so they begin to follow them. And when they get there, there's this huge group of people waiting for them. You ever done that? You ever feel on empty? Like you got nothing else to give, nothing else that you can do, and then God just drops like somebody that needs you in that moment. It may not be 5,000 people, but God drops somebody there and you're like, oh, man, I got nothing to give. And we're familiar with the story, right? There's 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes, and they do this miracle, and Jesus multiplies the food, and there's baskets left over of all the foods, and they feed everybody. Just so you know, it's not just 5,000 people, because they only counted the men back then. It's more like 15 or 20,000, including wives and children, right? 15, 20,000 people that they feed with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. And they get done doing this amazing miracle and feeding all of these people, and there's baskets of food left over. And let's look at verse 45 and 46. And it says, immediately he, talking about Jesus, immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to Busse, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had taken leave of them, he went up to the mountain to pray. And we see account after account after account after account in the 3 years of Jesus' ministry where he would often withdraw and go pray. Something miraculous would happen. They would feed 20,000 people, 15, 20,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Jesus feels on empty. He has nothing else to give at that moment. He needs to go pray, and he withdraws. So often in our lives when we don't feel like we have anything else to give and we feel like we just keep going and going and going and going. We're like the Energizer Bunny, right? We just keep going and going. Like, I got nothing else to give. I'm tired. I'm exhausted, but I just got to go. I just got to get this done. I just have this to do. I just have that to do. I've just got to get things done. Jesus is like, nope, time to pray. And he withdraws. He sends the disciples away because he wanted some one-on-one time with the Father. And he sends the disciples out, and he goes up to the mountaintop, and he prays. And it's interesting in Jesus' life how often he does this. And it makes me just take a step back and wonder why we can't do it in our own lives. Some of our lives don't set themselves up for us to just withdraw and pray. Like, you can't tell your toddler, hey, sorry, mom's feeling on empty. You just sit here and watch whatever you're watching. I'm going to go pray. Don't eat anything. Don't put anything in your mouth. I know you don't understand me, but just stay here. I'm feeling on empty. I got to go pray for a few minutes. Like, I know life doesn't work that way. Work's piling up. There's a lot of work to get done. I just got so much to do, but I can't withdraw at this moment. But I'm wondering, like, in the context of our lives, if what we're doing, if we're constantly praying, if we're constantly asking God to do something in our lives and about the situation we're in, how different would that look? And so today I want to take a twist. We've been in the New Testament for most of this series so far for the first 3 weeks, but I want to take you to the book of Psalms today. And so turn back with me to Psalm 139. And if you're familiar with Psalm 139, it is basically this prayer of David. David, the king of Israel, the man who was after God's own heart, the guy that slayed Goliath, the new king that took over for Saul, that ran from Saul for so long. Like, it's that David, and the David of David and Goliath, that's writing this prayer of his, I believe, to God himself. And so I just want to read Psalm 139 and then share a few thoughts with you. It says, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, and I cannot attain it. Where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, Even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for the darkness is as light with you. Let's stop there for just a second. So here's what's happening in the psalm. David is writing this prayer to God, and he's like, hey, you have searched me. Don't miss that. It's past tense. You have searched me, and you have known me. And then David just begins to paint this picture of like just this. He's on cloud 9. You ever been on cloud 9? Like things just couldn't be better in your life. Like, whoa, this is so amazing. I love life. Like life is so great. Like we've all been there at some point. David's on cloud 9. He's like, you've searched me, you know what's in my heart. God, you are amazing, you are wonderful, you know everything about me. No matter where I go, I'm in your presence. You are awesome, you are great. God, you are so good, Lord. You are just so good. Everywhere I go, you're there. All these things are happening in my life. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. I can't attain it. Where shall I go from your spirit? I can't flee from you. Like he is on cloud 9, just talking about how amazing and how wonderful God is. Let's keep reading. Verse 13. For you formed my inner parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I would count them, there are more than the sand. I awake and I am still with you. I mean, David's on cloud 9. Like, God, you know every part of me. You've knitted me together. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made in your image. Your good ways are like the sands on the ocean. I can't count the ways, the way you love me, the way you bless me. God, you are so good to me. You've searched me and you know me and you're amazing. And then all of a sudden something happens. Verse 19. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. O men of blood, depart from me. Like, huh? Wait a second. You search me, you know me. All this stuff is going on in my life. All this stuff is really good. God, you're so good. You're so amazing. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I love you. You're beautiful. You're awesome. Your good ways are like the eyes on the sand. Slay the wicked. What? Huh? Like what's going on in David's heart right now? Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. O men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there are any grievous ways in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Does your prayer life ever sound like that? Right? You ever start out like, God, you're good, you're so great, awesome, thank you for Next Level Conference, thank you for letting me get away for 3 days and hear from you. You're so good, Lord, I love you so much. Slay the wicked, I hate those that hate you. I'm so angry, I'm so mad, I'm so disgusted. I can't stand this person, I can't stand that person. Lord, I wish you would do this. Why is this happening to me? All these things, right? Does your prayer life ever sound like that? Mine does. And here's David as a leader, right? The man after God's own heart. This is the prayer life of a leader here. This is the prayer life of someone who's trying to figure life out. And I believe it sounds so much like ours. God, you know me, you search me, you know my heart, and you are so amazing and so wonderful, and all these things are so great. Slay the wicked. I hate those that hate you. Like, where does that come from? Like, you were just saying, like, God's good ways are better than the sand that's on the ocean, like, the sand that's on the beach kind of thing. Like, where does that come from? And he goes through this fill of hatred. I hate them with complete hatred. I count them as my enemies. What is going on in David's heart? And then all of a sudden, he's like, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there are any grievous ways in me, and lead me in the way of everlasting. I think it's interesting that David goes from being on cloud 9 to spewing hatred to, Lord, search me again. I think that anytime that we see a speck of dirt pop up in our lives, anytime we see something, some hatred or some frustration or some anger or some discourse or whatever it may be that rises up in our life, like this should be our prayer. Like David goes from being on cloud 9 to being spewing a bunch of hatred to, God, what is going on in my heart? Search me, know my thoughts, test me. Like, Lord, help me to follow your ways. Okay, I'm good again. Let me go back. Kill them, wicked, hate them. God, search my heart, know me, go test my thoughts. Just help me. Like David is in this interesting thing. And anytime that I believe that we see a speck of dirt come up in our lives, I think anytime that we feel frustrated, anytime that we feel withdrawn, anytime that we feel empty, I believe in that moment we need to stop and we need to pray. I could see David in his life. I could see him following this pattern. Like, God, search me, know me, you're awesome, you're great. Oh, there's some stuff starting to stir in my heart. It's not really good. Let me stop and pray. Because what happens when we don't stop and pray is that that's when we find ourselves empty. And we find ourselves isolated. We find ourselves playing hide and seek and hiding from God because He's the last place that we want to turn, the last place that we want to go. And we find ourselves hidden from Him. And so there's a couple things, 4 things that I want to share with you briefly for just a moment. We see in verse 23 and 24, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. See if there is any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. I believe in our lives, I believe the first thing that we need to do is we need to be open to be searched. We need to be open to be searched. So often in our lives, we're just closed off. So often in our lives, like we don't want to allow God in. So often in our lives, we don't want to allow God to look at the junk that's in your heart. This week was one of those times for me. Like everybody would probably say, hey, Kevin's got everything together. Everything's good. Everything's going well. He's the pastor of the church. All these things are good. But this week I had this opportunity to just take a step back and open my heart and allow God to just search my heart. And He found some things that I don't think were really good, to be honest with you. Found some things that He was able to fix this week and point me back in the right direction. And He found some stuff that's just not good. And so I believe being open to being searched, that we've got to do this often. That's the key. That often we got to ask God to search us. Anytime we feel some hatred rise up, anytime we see a speck of dirt in our life, anytime temptation that Josh Turner talked about with this song that he has, anytime temptation rises up, anytime that we feel something coming our way, we have to stop and we have to pray and we have to ask God to search our hearts. The second thing I believe that we have to do is we need to be open to knowing our own heart. Be open to knowing your own heart. I believe it's one thing to ask God or to give God permission to search us. Like if you find yourself in the prayer of what David is saying, like, God, search me and know my heart. He's not just saying, hey, search me, God. Like, show me the things that aren't good in my life. Show me the things that aren't well in my heart. The things that are keeping me from being in the ultimate relationship with you. Don't just search me, but Lord, know my heart and help me to see that. So it's one thing to give God permission to search us, but it's something different for Him to know us. And it's another thing for us to know ourselves and be open to know where you're at. Like, have you ever found yourself feeling empty? You ever found yourself feeling isolated? Or maybe you don't even realize that you're there until it's too late. Like, that's how temptation works sometimes. You find yourself somewhere and you don't even know how you got there. Whatever that looks like. This is the idea of us being open to knowing our own heart. That's why David is saying, search me and know my heart. God, show me those things in my life. The third thing that we have to do is we need to invite God to test our heart. Here's what David is doing. You ever heard the the phrase, like, we're turning up the heat on them. Like, right? David is asking God to test his heart. He's asking God to turn the heat up on him. He's asking God to burn off the impurities that are in his life. Like the way that gold gets better and better and better is they just keep burning off the impurities. When David says, hey, test my heart, he's asking God, like, hey, test me. Burn off these impurities in my life. Show me where I'm wrong. Like, show me what's going on inside my heart. Like, test me, Lord, and help me. Burn this stuff off of my life so that I can be more like you. Search me, O God, and know my heart and test me. Try me. Know my thoughts. The fourth thing that we need to do is we need to invite God to expose our anxious thoughts. We need to invite God to expose our anxious thoughts. If you look at the Hebrew of the term of anxious thoughts, it means like anxious doubts or disquieting. Here's the thing about your life, and maybe you realize this about yourself, and maybe you don't, and I don't know if this will be new to you or not, but your thoughts drive the train. Typically where your mind is, your heart will follow, and then you find yourself somewhere that you shouldn't be. Somebody does something wrong against you, and you get angry and frustrated, and then things start to stir up, and then you say something that you don't really want to do. You find yourself alone, and you're like, well, nobody will know if I look at this image on my phone real quick, and then next thing you know, one image turns into a struggle with pornography. Like, our thoughts drive the train. Our thoughts lead us down the way that we don't need to be. They drive the train for us. Like my translation, which is the ESV, by the way, it says, and see if there be any grievous way in me or offensive way in me. Is there something that's causing me pain? Is there something in me that's causing others pain? Like, if there's any of this in me, if there's any grievous or offensive way, like, God, do something with the things that I'm thinking and the way that I'm acting. Like, God, help me. If there's anything in me, fix it. So be open to be searched. Be open to knowing your own heart. Invite God to test your heart. And invite God to expose your anxious thoughts. So here's the idea that I believe that we have to allow God to lead us. We have to allow God to lead us. Because here's the product of what happens in our lives. Here's the product that happens in our lives. We have beliefs, and then we have thoughts, and then we have actions. Prayer helps you work through all of that. You have beliefs, you have thoughts, you have actions. The things that you believe about something, the things that you believe about a situation lead you to begin to think about it, begins to change your thought process, and the next thing you know, you're acting on it. And I believe that our prayer life, if our prayer life is what it should be, if we are second and Christ is first in our lives, then our prayer life may look like this. Search me, God. You know me. You are good. You are on high. You are amazing. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. You know everything about me. You know everything that's there. And then things begin to stir up in your heart. Something happens during the day. Things begin to happen. Things aren't good of what's going on in your mind and your heart. And you find yourself at the end of the prayer exactly like David is again. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test my anxious thoughts. If there's any grievous way in me, Lord, lead me in the way of everlasting. Like, God has a future for you, right? We talk about it often, that God loves you and that God has a plan for you and that God desires something for you and that you are just truly, you are a child of God. Like, He just loves you and He desires to spend time with you. One of the things that they asked us at this conference this week that I was at that absolutely floored me and rocked my world, and it was one of those things where if you've ever found yourself in the presence of God, like just bawling your eyes out because God's done something to you, this was one of these truths for me this week. And so often we fall in love with who we think God is, or we fall in love with what we believe God can do. Or there's other things in our lives that just become more important than our relationship with God. Maybe it's planting a church. Maybe it's being a pastor. Maybe it's our job. Maybe it's our family. And we're doing things for God, but we have lost our relationship with God. And so there's other things in our life that become more important. And God's like, no! I want to be the most important thing in your life. I want you to love me for me. I don't love you because you planted a church. I don't love you because you work here. I don't love you because you do that. I don't love you because you're a great mother. I don't love you because you're a great father. I don't love you because you're a great friend. I love you because you're you. You are a child of mine. So often we get so busy and our heart gets full with so much junk and so much garbage that we need to find ourselves where David is. How in the world can we live our life second if we're full of so much garbage and so much junk? Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me. If there's any grievous way in me, then lead me in the way of everlasting. Like, God, help me from that. Let's put God first in our lives. Let's put God first in our lives with our prayer life. And if you don't know what that looks like, you don't know how to do that, then let's talk after service about it. What does it look like to have a prayer life? Because be in a constant state of prayer. I don't know. I'm working on it. We'll work on it together. But let's get there. Because if we can get there, then I believe God has something for us, and God will do something different in us. And then it's easy for us to say, man, I am second because God is first. Because look at the way that I'm living my life. And anytime something starts to rise up within you, search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me. If there's any grievous way in me, if there's any offensive way in me, if there's pain in here or pain that I'm causing out there, God, fix it. And lead me in the way of everlasting. Okay, let me go about my day. Something else happens, search me, O God, know my heart, test me, test if there's any grievous or offensive way in me. Lord, lead me in the way of everlasting, and keep going. 5 minutes later, somebody else is going to do something that makes you frustrated. Search me, O God, know my heart. Test me. If there's any offensive way in me, then Lord, lead me in the way of everlasting. You get home, things are crazy, life's going nuts, you just want to strangle your husband or your wife and your kids, and things are nuts. Search me, O God. Know my heart. Test me. If there's any offensive way in me, then lead me in the way of everlasting. That's how we live our life second. That's how we become second, and God becomes first in our lives. When we are constantly in a state of prayer, we're constantly asking God to do something. We're constantly asking God to reveal something to us. We're constantly saying, hey, God, this is what's happening in my life. Like, will you do this? Will you help me here? Will you show me this? Maybe something good happened. You're like, God, praise you. Thank you for that phone call. Thank you for that blessing. Thank you for that check that came in the mail. Thank you for this. Thank you for that, whatever it may be. If we lived our lives that way, I promise you, it would look different. We wouldn't find ourselves hiding, playing hide and seek. We wouldn't find ourselves on the island of isolation, which is a really bad place to be. And so I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and bow your heads for me for just a moment.